Blossom Diaspora Media, testifying to the good news of God's grace. Blossom Diaspora Media, testifying to the good news of God's grace.
Good evening, my viewer. This is Sophie, your mental health coach. I welcome you into our Mental Health Hour show. Last time we were not able to do a show, and we apologize for that. But I'm looking forward today to interact with you, to learn from you, and also to just know how have you been, how has this show been a benefit to you. So yeah, please share on your Facebook comments. Just let me know your progress. Let me know how you've been taking care of your mental health. Today I'm here and I want to talk about a very important topic, that is setting healthy boundaries. It's a topic that many of us are not open. Some are a bit they're a bit not open to the topic because sometimes when you start setting boundaries, you are known to be selfish, you are known to be you're not considering other people's feelings or interests. So today I would want us to just describe what a boundary is. And a boundary is like a property line, a personal property line. You see, if you take most of our homes, we have a fence. We have the boundary. You cannot just get into someone's home without getting through a gate. They have even put a gate because there is a fence or a hedge around the homestead. So how do we, like for human beings, for us to have a better mental health or to be emotionally okay, we need to set our boundaries. So as I said, a boundary is a personal property line. It's upon you to decide what line in the various aspects of my life, what are these property lines that I'm going to put? What are these property lines? What are these lines that I'm going to put in my relationship, how I interact with people, either at work, either in church, either in school? The property lines that you put will guide how you interact with people without affecting your mental health. The other aspect is your emotion. Which line are you going to put so that your emotions are not, you're not drained, or someone does not cross over, or someone does not hurt you. Remember, even the emotions, it's very important to protect your emotions because they are part of our well-being. So I'm just trying to bring out the aspects that affect our mental health and why it is important to have this line, this boundary, even in our finances. The other aspect is finances. You've seen how much finances can affect our mental health. We've had people who overcommit their finances. We've had people who've taken loans for others, but now you have to put a boundary or a line on how you relate even with your finances because there is also that's how you interact, or that relationship with your money, with your finances. It's also important to put that boundary. So that is why I'm saying setting healthy boundaries is a very important topic that you should not shy away from. And now the reason as to why most of us do not have boundaries in place, it's, if you can look at how we were brought up, when we were very little, we were not allowed to even say a no. You are not allowed to choose what we want and what we do not want, because our parents determined what was good for us. So therefore, we did not develop that skill of setting that boundary or telling people, this is who I am and this is who I am not. Because we have to accept how we were brought up in our families, that we were not given that chance to express ourselves. We were not given that chance to even choose what we want. So we get to maybe 20 years, 30 years later, you realize, oh, I cannot decide what I want. So you really do not know how to set your boundaries, because that is not what you are used to. You have not grown, you didn't grow up knowing how to set your boundaries. But there's always a chance. Now we are adults and we are empowered. We have this information all over, and that's why we can now change and start adapting ways of setting healthy boundaries. So I want to give an illustration of how setting boundaries has affected our lives. If you can look at, okay, let me give an example with where I come from. We usually have irrigation systems, and sometimes there is a hedge. So you have a neighbor and maybe this is our home. So when you're irrigating using your sprinkler system, the water, if your irrigation system is not, it is faulty, the water will you will irrigate someone else's crops and yours will dry. So you put up the sprinkler system and it will irrigate your neighbors. And this neighbor, probably he doesn't even care whether the crops are okay. He doesn't care whether the crops get water. He has never even given attention to his irrigation system. But myself, like in my now, maybe if it's our shamba, maybe the irrigation system has a fault, and that's why the water is getting its way to my neighbor's land. So what happens? My crop will dry, but my neighbor's crop will continue to bloom. Why will it continue to grow? Because he's able to access my water through my faulty sprinkler system, but mine will continue to dry up. I'm giving this example in this way. Setting healthy boundaries, how it affects us is that the person who is responsible of their lives, what happens is they are very responsible but very unhappy. So you are responsible of your emotions because you are always giving out to the other person, and in return you are unhappy. But what do we do to the other person? The other person is responsible, just like the one who does not take care of his crop, but his crops are still watered through the faulty system, the sprinkling system. So his crops just grow. So this person is irresponsible but happy. And that is what happens when we do not set healthy boundaries. You have to ask yourself, in this situation that I am, if it's in a relationship, if it's at work, you have to ask, well, I'm responsible. The other person who is taking advantage, or the person who is benefiting from what I'm giving, is he responsible enough? Because I can give, that is responsible, but still remain unhappy, but the other person is irresponsible but very happy, because by the end of the day he's still benefiting from you. So that is why I will want us to learn about setting healthy boundaries. And let me give an example with parents. You can have maybe a 30-year-old who is living in your house, and this is where we need healthy boundaries, even in our families. And this goes to our parents. So you have a 30-year-old, or let me say a 28-year-old and above, and this son or this daughter is living in your house. So you're providing shelter, you're providing food, you're providing clothes, everything. So this child does not even bother to look for income. I mean, he's okay. You've made this person very comfortable in your house. Now, look at this. This adult becomes irresponsible but very happy because of what you're providing. Because you as a parent, you have not set boundaries of how this adult should live in your house. This adult should at least be taught, go outside, get some income for yourself, or even go get your own house, go get, you should start living, But the parent and the child, because there is no boundary between them, you've made this adult in your house very happy and irresponsible. But you as a parent, you're assuming, oh, I'm taking care of my child, but this is an adult, he can do something. So you end up being a responsible parent but a very unhappy parent. So that is why today you're going to learn about setting healthy boundaries, and let's see some reasons why we are not able to set our boundaries. And I had mentioned how we grew up in our African culture and what has been instilled in us. That was not instilled in us. Setting boundaries is a very new thing that we'll have to instill as we are growing up. We have to instill 20 years later, 30 years later. It's something that we are now coming to recognize and understand what setting healthy boundaries is. Now, for instance, you can get someone who is not able to set boundaries because he's afraid of being left, or he's afraid of being abandoned. Like, we can look at friendships. You end up giving yourself, giving every time. You're the only one who is putting yourself on behalf of others, because you fear that they may leave you. You fear that you may not receive the love back, you know. And this setting healthy boundaries, for those people who are afraid of setting boundaries, is because, number one, they are afraid of being abandoned. And one thing that we need to realize that for these people, the people who are afraid of setting boundaries, they always give with the wrong intention. They do not give for themselves. They give because they are seeking validation, because they are seeking to be loved. So they believe, if I do this, I will receive back. If I do this, I'll be validated. So it is always important, for especially if you know you're not good at setting boundaries, ask yourself, why is it that I'm afraid of having boundaries? Is it because I am a people pleaser? Is it because I seek validation from others? Is it because I am afraid of being abandoned? The other fear that people have is fear of the other person's anger. You're afraid how this person will respond to you. Like, for instance, someone tells you, let's go and maybe do shopping, and you're afraid of saying, I do not want to go shopping, because you do not know how this person will react to you. Maybe when you're growing up, you could see your parents, every time you could try to bring a no, or maybe you're trying to express yourself, and maybe your parent could be angry at you. And now you've grown knowing that if I bring out my issues, if I express myself, the other person may show anger towards me, and that's why you're afraid of setting boundaries. So it's always important to check, look at the root causes. Why am I not able to express myself? Why am I not able to just say no, or just communicate whatever you want? The other thing is fear of punishment. You realize, as I've said, when we are growing up, you want to communicate things and your parent will punish you, you know, either physical or the physical abuse. It could be verbal abuse or emotional abuse, you know. But then you grow up and you fear being punished. So maybe we are doing a particular job and you're feeling overwhelmed and you cannot even communicate because you're fearing. Your fear of punishment is your core. Your fear of punishment is your core to communicating your boundaries, to expressing how you're feeling, to expressing that you're overwhelmed, to expressing that you are, you know, you're tired. So it's always important to look at why am I not able to set boundaries? And I like it when people communicate and they're like, Sophie, you know, I'm always a yes person. Someone will tell you I'm a yes person, and you ask them, why are you always saying yes? And they're like, I'm afraid they will leave me. So from there, we are able to work with this person and now help that person set boundaries. So what is the other thing that people think? The other fear is the fear of being called unspiritual. And this one, I will take it, especially maybe for my fellow Christians, do not throw stones at me. But you have seen Christians who are not able to draw a line between family time and maybe church time, especially for those who have families, and they end up forgetting how to bond with their children, to bond with their wives, because they are so much into church. So when do you draw this boundary? You know, it's always important. You cannot assume that you are unspiritual, yet we are told in Proverbs that chapter 4 verse 23, guard your heart. When we are told about guarding your heart, I mean, when I pick that word, it's all about setting boundaries. Even for those who are not able, just know that there's time for your family, there's time for church, just try to strike a balance so that at least you are able to serve the two sides. Because what happens, you end up hurting your children, you end up hurting maybe your wife or even your husband because you're giving too much. So it's always important to guard your heart. The other thing is people are afraid of being ashamed, and that's why they are not able to set healthy boundaries. So those are the kind of fears that make people not speak out or not set healthy boundaries. But then let's also check, what are these types of setting boundaries? And I will want us to start with the types of setting boundaries. And number one, we have finances. These are an area that we all know. You can find yourself that you have overcommitted your finances such that you have nothing with you left. Like, if it's saving, you have oversaved. If it is loans, you have so many loans. Like, when do you draw the line? When do you put the boundary between you and the money? And if I can reiterate what one of our guests said, the reason as to why sometimes when our finances, things that these things are not permanent. Today you may have a lot of money, tomorrow you don't have that money. So, and he said that sometimes we are not able to draw a line between Sophie and my money. Like, we always see like we are one, but we have to understand so that when that money is over during that season, I'm not affected mentally. So finances is a very important place. It's a very important aspect where we need to set, it's a type of a boundary that we need to assess. Like, for instance, when friends are always calling you, hey, send me this much, send me this amount of money, send me, those kind of friends. But why are you afraid of saying, I only have this much, I cannot give you this money, I cannot give you this much, or I can only give you this much? And I will also take an example where we have children, maybe especially for those working in Nairobi, and you have parents maybe wherever they are, and they rely on you, so that you still have fear. If I don't give my parents this amount of money, this and this will happen. Why are you afraid of communicating and saying, oh, dad, this is what I can offer, oh, mom, this is what I can offer, or even to your siblings, oh, this is how much I can give? That is a type of finances. It's an area that we need to set boundaries, because by the end of the day, you may end up borrowing money because you want to please others. You want to borrow money or even salary advances. You're so much into salary advances because you want to please your family, you want to please your friends, you want to please, So this is a type of finance boundaries. It's a very important place. It's a type of a boundary that we all need to check. You can even take your time and think, this financial boundary, is it a place that I need to assess, and how am I going to improve on this? How much money do I give out in a month? How much money do I save for myself? Yeah, so that is one type of so always communicate when it comes to your finances. Always communicate about where you are and what you can do and what you cannot do. Also set limits on lending, set limits on borrowing. It's very important, because by the end of the day, if you do not address your finances, you will be affected mentally, because now you've borrowed too much, maybe you've given out your money too much, and you will end up without. Maybe if it's for those who borrow, you'll have so much interest that you need to pay, and you may be auctioned, the banks, the calls, the need, you may have so much depression, you may be depressed, you may be stressed out, anxiety, all because of finances. So the other type of boundary is social boundary. How do you want your relationship with people to be? What do you want in this relationship? It could be the casual relationships, could be the romantic relationship. Are you able to set boundaries with your friends? Are you able to say, these are my values, these are my principles? Do they know who you are? Set your boundaries even with your social circle. It's always important how you interact with them. It's always important to let them understand, I cannot talk about these topics with you, I can talk these topics with you. set some lines. I told you a boundary is a personal property line. So when it comes to the social circles, put that line, put that personal property line. This is how I'm going to interact with so and so, And also, still under social boundaries, you can also learn how to put distance from toxic relationships or toxic friendships. That is, and now the reason as to why some of us are sticking in toxic relationships, it's because you do not have boundaries. You have not communicated your values. You cannot even say I know to something, and you continue staying in that. And the moment you stay long in those kind of relationships, you will end up being affected mentally. Let's also talk about the time boundaries. How are you with your time? Do you keep procrastinating stuff, maybe because you feel that you have enough time? You could find someone who is always late into things, into delivering. Or do you communicate to people who are always late in your circle, or people who cannot even, who deliver, or their performances are determined by time, but these people do not care? So do you communicate about the time? Let people understand about your time limits, okay? Let people also understand that there is also time for your self-care. There's that time for you, there's time for me, where I need to do maybe with some reflection and think about myself, my achievements. Maybe it's my time for just a gratitude, Set those time. The time boundaries is very important. How much time are you going to spend with your friends? How much time are you going to spend with your families? How much time am I going to spend in church? Time boundaries are very important. And sometimes you may go to a friend, and for those who have no boundaries, the time boundaries, where they have neglected them, you go to a friend, you spend there, you spend so much time, yet probably you could have done something which could have been beneficial to you. Let's talk also about the physical boundaries. The physical boundaries, your space. Who are those people that you bring into your space? Who are those people? Do you communicate even when it comes to maybe the physical touch? Are you just comfortable when someone touch? Are you able to express yourself and just say, no, don't touch me, Or just because you have been taught not to say no when you are growing up, you just allow everyone to touch you. Remember, I told you a boundary, it's like having that fence. And if you are not careful, everyone will just get into your space. Everyone. Everyone, animals, all kinds of people will just get into your space because you have not set your boundaries right. So if it's the physical boundaries, make sure that your physical space, you can take care of your physical, the personal space. You're comfortable with your personal space, where you live, at your place of work, in your house. How is your space? The physical, the other side, the other boundaries. Do you take care of your physical body? How do you take care of yourself? So all those are areas that we need to relook at when it comes to the physical boundaries. And then lastly, we have emotional boundaries. And this is where you find there's some people who offer themselves emotionally, and they're like, I'm the only one who is always offering emotional support. But when do you fill yourself up? When do you just set yourself aside and feel yourself? Emotionally, you're always drained. People are just withdrawing from you, drawing from you. But you need to take care of your emotions. Are you able to identify your emotions? And when I talk about emotions, sometimes we have interesting ways of identifying your emotions sometimes, or even feelings. You ask someone how you're feeling, and they're just saying it's good. And when someone tells me good, I have to help in how we are going to, because good is not a feeling. Are you able to identify your emotions? Are you able to identify your feelings, so that you are able to develop these emotional boundaries? So set those boundaries, learn to express yourself, learn to express your emotions, even when you are in your relationships with people. So now we've discussed the various types of setting of boundaries, and we've talked about the physical boundaries, we've talked about time boundaries, we've talked about financial boundaries, we've also talked about the social boundaries. So it's upon you to just sit down and look at which type of boundary am I struggling with. Is it finances? Is it time? Is it emotional? Yeah, so it's always important to look back and check. So how are we going to develop these healthy boundaries? Because I told you, it's not, we have to develop this skill of communicating what we are and what we are not. We have to develop that skill of drawing that clear line, the personal property line. It's now important to make it very clear. Now, because we have information, we have the various aspects of our lives where boundaries are affected. We have now learned the different types of boundaries, but now it's upon us to understand, well, now how do I set these boundaries? Number one, it's identify your limits. Now, look at the areas that you have given yourself and you end up feeling sad, or you end up feeling bitter. From those situations, you will be in a position to understand, oh, I usually feel sad because someone crossed the boundary. And someone crossed the boundary because probably you did not identify that limit, or you didn't even have that boundary, you didn't have that limit. So number one is to identify your limit. Which limits am I going to put? Which limits, under what areas? Under emotions, what limits am I going to put? If it's time, what limits am I going? If it's finances, what limits am I going to put? If it's the physical, we've said, what limits am I going to put? So number one is identify your limits. Then number two, it's always important to recognize your emotions. Understand your emotions. Understand, when someone does this to me, I get angry, but you always hide the emotion so that the other person does not see your reaction. So right now you have to understand, what are those emotions that come up when someone crosses over my boundary? Okay, so it's always important to recognize your emotions. The guilt that comes when you do something, maybe you feel guilty. When you do something, you feel guilty. Always understand your emotions. The moment you recognize your emotions, even setting those limits will be so easy for you, because now you'll understand that this is what happens when I do this and this. Then number three, communicate assertively. Communicating assertively is where you stop blaming others and being accountable of your emotions. Be accountable of yourself. When you are hurt by the other person, you do not say, you did this, you did this and this. No, you say, I feel disappointed because this and this. You start using the I statements. Start pointing yourself. I'm not saying that you're putting blame on you, but you're being accountable of your emotions. If, for instance, someone did not keep time and we decided to meet at a place, I will not say you got late, so I won't say that maybe you will say you've not done well. Now you're pointing the other person, but communicate to this person as, I am disappointed because you could not keep time. So the other person will understand you from a point of, oh, you are not blaming me. It's not about blaming the other person. It's about communicating how you feel, and that's how you become assertive. You start communicate I statement. Start using the I statement. I feel, I am disappointed. Because when you tell the other person you are late because this, they will become defensive, and the communication between the two of you will not end up well. So the two of you will end up hurt, because the other person will be like, you didn't even understand why. You didn't want even to know why I got late. But when you say, I am disappointed because of this and this, when you start using the I statement, then that person will be in a position to understand and probably rectify even in future. The other thing is to be consistent. The moment you set your boundaries, be consistent with them. If you communicate that you want us to keep time. If you communicate that I want my finances to be like this, be consistent with the limits, the boundaries that you have established, the boundaries that you are communicating, try to be consistent. I know it could be difficult, especially for us who are understanding setting boundaries at this age. I know you could feel guilty. I know you could feel maybe I am selfish. But, we said, I read somewhere and it said that the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your habits. So if you develop your skills, like for instance, let's take an example of the no. Okay, so if you are supposed to say no, no is a muscle. I want us to connect the consistency and the no as a no muscle. So the moment you start saying no to the people close to you, no, you continue expanding your circle to the people that you're saying no to, then you strengthen your muscle, the no muscle. So it's always important to be consistent with your boundaries. Don't say today you're doing this, tomorrow. You'll even confuse the people around you with your boundaries. You'll even confuse yourself. So it's always important to be consistent. Just as I've told you about building the no muscle. It's like consistently you're building the habit of saying no, the habit of saying no to your friends, the habit of saying no to finances, no to the things that affect you negatively, So yeah, it's always important to be consistent with your boundaries. And lastly, communicate your boundaries to your friends. It's always important to communicate, because it's like inviting a stranger to your house and they do not know the rules in your house. How do you expect them to know about your limits or your property lines or your boundaries? How do you expect them to know about your boundaries if you have not communicated these boundaries to the stranger who is coming to your house? So it's always important to communicate your boundaries to your friends, to your family members. And I'm telling you, always consider the aspects, the different aspects that we mentioned: social circle, your relationships, your finances, time, all those. The boundaries that you have in those different aspects. Communicate them, communicate. Express, you always remember to express yourself. Do not be afraid of expressing yourself. So as I come to the end of my show, just take some time and reflect on the aspects that you have been struggling with, in the areas that you've been struggling with setting boundaries. Okay, then look at the types of boundaries that you have mentioned. Then also check how you are going to develop your boundaries. We have said you can communicate your boundaries. You should communicate your boundaries to every person who is around you. Always be consistent with your boundaries. We've talked about the no muscle. When you're building that no muscle, you have to be consistent. It's all about the habits, those quality habits, until it develops. Then you can always identify your emotions. We've talked about that. And also recognize or identify your limits as well. So thank you so much. If you have any question in regards to setting healthy boundaries, let me know, because the moment we have healthy boundaries, even our mental health will be very good. Our mental health will be protected. So thank you so much, my viewer, for watching me. If you have any question, just ask and we will respond. Thank you so much and have a very lovely evening. Asante.
Blossom Diaspora Media, testifying to the good news of God's grace.